State your name for the record, please.
Faith Warren.
And spell your last name for the record.
Warren.
State your address for the record, please.
2041 First Avenue, Apartment 11, New York, New York.
Thank you. First two questions are on the record.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Warren.
Good morning.
My name is Anthony Giuliano, and the law firm that I work for represents Lauren Brickner McDonald in a lawsuit that's been brought against United Airlines. We are here today to take your deposition. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. Prior to now, have you ever had a deposition taken before?
No.
Okay. Without going into details of the conversation, have you had the opportunity to speak with your counsel about the deposition?
Yes.
Okay. I will go through a couple of very basic ground rules. That way we're both on the same page with regard to how the procedure works, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to be asking you questions that I think are relevant to the lawsuit. You will be providing me answers to the best of your ability. You've been placed under oath. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. That oath does require you to tell the truth. You understand that?
Yes.
Although we are in a comfortable conference room here today, your sworn deposition testimony may be used at some point in this case as the trial court or as the trial judge or pre-trial judge permits it. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Excuse me. If you don't know the answer to a question that I asked, it's fine. Just tell me that you don't know. We are going to be talking about some things that happened some time ago, so I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer as long as it's the truth. We don't want you to guess at any answers. You can, however, estimate or approximate answers to my questions if that's something that you're able to do. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. Your attorney may object to some questions that are asked. If you do hear an objection, just kind of hold your answer and wait for further instructions from your counsel, okay?
Okay.
You've been doing a good job so far. Just try to keep your answers verbal rather than like shakes and nods. That way the court reporter
Okay.
can write down everything that you say and that there's no confusion in the transcript, okay?
Sure.
And the last thing is, even though we're sort of having a conversation and you can anticipate where a lot of my questions are going to be going, just wait for me to finish the question before you provide your answer again. That way the transcript is as clear as it can be, okay? All right. Thank you for your address. Are you currently employed?
Yes.
By whom?
I'm a nanny, so a family.
Okay. How long have you been doing that?
Since May.
Of this year?
Yes.
Okay. And prior to that, were you employed by anyone else?
No.
At any point were you employed by United Airlines?
Yes. Well, yeah, done before.
When was that?
I worked for United from August 31st, 2015 to March 26th, 2018.
And during that period of time, what position or positions did you hold with United?
Just flight attendant.
Okay. Other than United, have you been employed as a flight attendant for any other airline?
No.
The accident that we're here to discuss today happened in June of 2016. So based on your prior answer, you were employed with United as a flight attendant at that time, correct?
Yes.
Prior to actually working on flights as a flight attendant, was there any training involved?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I spent 5 weeks in Houston, and we learned all manner of safety, evacuating planes, customer service, drills, commands. Yeah.
Okay. As part of that training, were you given any documents?
Yes.
What types of documents?
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, as a part of that training, you said you were there for about 5 weeks. Did the company provide you with any handbooks or manuals or any kind of documents with respect
Yes,
to
we
the training?
had a paper manual at the time.
Okay. And that was provided by United?
Yes.
Is that something you got to keep after the training was finished?
Yes, when we began training, that was our manual until we left the company.
Okay. And you had access to that manual during the time that you were employed by the company?
Yes, it comes on every flight.
Okay. When you leave the company, do you keep the manual or do you give it back?
So we switched from a paper to an electronic manual in 2016, and you do give the electronic one back after you leave.
Okay. How do you get an electronic manual?
They have an agreement with Apple that we had iPhone, I think they were 6 Pluses at the time, and they totally reboot and re-hardware them, and then it's like a united device, and it has our FAOM manual, which is all of our like safety procedures, and then customer service policies and our sales app, and all of those things are all on one device.
Okay, so it doesn't go onto a phone that you already have, it's a separate device that United gives you?
It's a separate device that United owns.
Okay, and then you give it back at the end of your employment?
Yes.
Okay. When the switch happened from paper to electronic, did you have to give the paper manual back or did you get to keep that?
You didn't have to, but they changed so much with the updates and stuff that a paper manual from even 6 months ago is pretty useless.
Other than that 5-week training, throughout the course of your employment with United, were there any other training sessions that you were involved in?
We go to requalification. It's called CQ, continued qualification, every year.
And is it the same time every year, or is it based on the date of your hire or something else?
It's based on the date of your hire.
Okay. And how long is that yearly requalification?
It's 2 days.
I know you said it was in 2016 that the paper manuals changed to electronic. Do you remember when in 2016 that would have been?
No, I don't remember.
Okay. Can you approximate whether it was the first half of the year as opposed to the second?
I believe it was probably the second half of the year, but I couldn't confirm. It was a slow transfer. So we had both, like we had the electronic and the paper manual for a while because the FAA had to make sure that we all knew how to use the electronic one before we were allowed to just have the electronic one.
Okay. And earlier you said that you have that manual on every flight with you. Is that a United requirement?
Yes, it's a requirement.
Other than what you've already told me, were you involved in any other training for any reason with United?
No. Well, I guess every so often they will send out like a thing that we have to complete online, but it doesn't usually have anything to do with safety stuff. It's
Okay.
service updates, or I think when all of the mass shootings started, they had us do some training like that online.
Okay. You did mention safety as being one of the topics or areas that were covered in that initial 5-week training.
Yes.
Can you tell me specifically what types of safety issues?
All of them. I mean, we go through the entire manual. That's our training. So you start with fighting fires, evacuating planes on land and in water, hijackings. I mean, it's the entire manual procedures that you go through. It's hard for me to remember
Okay.
exactly specifics of what they focus on, but all of it. And then health-related stuff, like, you know, there's a medical emergency on board. And
Any training with regard to, or strike that, are there any procedures in place that you recall related to carrying on baggage?
no, because that's not something that we do. The only training that we have when it comes to overhead bins is to make sure that they're closed and latched
Okay.
for takeoff and landing.
There are regulations, I assume, about where bags can and cannot be placed, right? Carry-on bags?
Yes.
And what do you recall about that?
Well, bags have to be stowed. So bags go in the overhead bin, and if they're small enough, we ask people to place them underneath the seat in front of them.
A moment ago, you said something to the effect, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but something to the effect that we're not involved in that when I asked you about carry-on bags. Did you mean we're not involved with actually storing and removing bags?
Yes.
Is that a United policy?
Yes. It's I don't know if that's like the right term for it, I suppose, but we are not. United doesn't want to be liable for any injuries that we might receive when lifting bags if they're heavy or taking them down. So it's if we decide to help like a disabled passenger with a bag, then it's at our own risk. So
Okay.
we don't handle overhead.
During the time that you were employed for United and acting as a flight attendant on United flights, was there ever a time where you would assist a passenger in either putting up an overhead bag into a bin or taking it out?
I helped a couple pregnant women with bags, but even then I'm small myself. So when there's somebody that needs help, I usually suggest or will help them find a passenger that looks bigger and stronger than me. I only lift bags if they're like a tote bag.
Is there typically a number of flight attendants on any given flight?
Well, we have FAA minimums that have to be on board, and then occasionally we'll be staffed over the minimum. So it's different for each configuration of a plane, how many flight attendants are required to be on board.
And how did United determine whether a flight would have the FAA minimum number of flight attendants or more?
With scheduling, the schedulers do that.
Do you still have your written manual from United?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to make a request to council that the manual be provided. I'll follow up with a letter to council and you can communicate with her about that, okay?
Yeah, I don't know if that's allowed because if there's a lot of secure
Okay.
safety
You could-
information. Yeah.
Whatever issues you may have, deal with your council.
Yeah, just put it in writing and I'll respond.
Yep. The electronic version of the manual, after the switch, do you know whether it was possible to print any of those materials?
I don't know.
Never tried?
No.
Council, I'm going to make the same request about the updated or the current electronic manual, and I'll follow that up with a letter to you, and we can take it from there, okay?
Yeah, that's fine, but when you say current, I mean, that might not be applicable during the accident.
That makes sense. We'll refine the request to the manual that was in effect at the time of the incident, June of 2016, and I'll again follow that up with a letter to you, okay?
Okay, and I'll respond.
Yep. Okay. Again, this incident was on June 15, I believe, 2016. Do you recall the incident that has led to this lawsuit?
Mostly.
Okay.
But, I mean, it's a few years ago.
I understand. a flight from Denver to Newark, is that correct?
Yes.
Earlier you were talking about sometimes there's the FAA minimum number of flight attendants on a flight and sometimes there are more. Do you know whether this particular flight had the minimum or if there were more?
We had our minimum of 3 and we had 1 deadheading crew member.
Okay, what do you mean by deadhead?
It means they're not currently working the flight, but they're being paid by United to transfer them from one hub to another. So they're on the list of crew members, but they weren't working.
Okay. In addition to yourself, do you recall the names of the other 2 flight attendants on that flight?
Claire and Brandon.
Okay. Would that be Claire Burkett?
Sure.
If you're not sure, that's okay.
I think she's gotten married, so.
Okay, at the time, do you know if her name was Claire Burkett?
No, I don't remember.
Okay, and Brandon Collop, do you know if that was Brandon's last name?
Yes.
Okay. You're no longer with the company. Do you know whether Claire is still with the company?
I don't know.
Do you know whether Brandon is still with the company?
Brandon is,
How do you know that?
because he told me.
Okay. When was that?
This morning when we saw each other.
Okay. Prior to this morning, when's the last time you spoke with Brandon?
That flight. That we worked together.
On this
one?
flight?
Yes.
Okay. And the reason for speaking to him this morning was?
To say hi and to prepare
Okay, was this a telephone conversation or in person?
in person.
Okay, was your attorney also present?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll not ask about any conversations that you guys had in the presence of your counsel. Have you spoken to Brandon at any time outside the presence of the United Counsel for this case, since the time of the flight?
When we were waiting in the office.
Okay, and the attorney was not present at that time?
Right.
Okay, did you talk about anything with respect to this lawsuit during that part of the conversation?
No.
Okay.
Not specifics about it.
Prior to the flight taking off in Denver, were you involved in any handling of carry-on bags?
Not that I remember, no.
Okay. And I know you said typically you don't, once in a while you would help out, but specifically to this flight you don't recall one way or the other?
No, I don't recall doing it.
Okay. Do you recall if this is a full flight?
I'm sure it probably was, but I don't have much memory of if every seat was filled.
Okay. I know sometimes when flights are full or crowded, there'll be announcements requesting that people check their bags as opposed to carrying them on. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Do you know whether that happened for this particular flight?
No, I don't know, because that happens out at the gate where we are not.
Okay, so you're not involved in that, whether or not it happened?
No.
For this particular flight, are you aware whether or not any of the other flight attendants assisted any passengers with their carry-on bags prior to departure?
Not that I'm aware of.
Didn't see any other flight attendants packing any overhead bins for this flight?
I don't remember seeing it, but I said it was 2 years ago.
You just don't know one or the other?
I don't remember seeing it.
Okay.
I don't see everything that, happens during boarding.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
understand your testimony. So I think what you're saying is you don't remember seeing it happen. It may have happened. You're just not sure one way or the other.
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of any conversations between any of the flight attendants and the passengers related to packing the overhead bins on that flight prior to departure?
Not that I remember.
The passenger who was the plaintiff in this lawsuit was seated in row 25. I believe her seat was 25C. So focusing your attention to that area of the plane, are you aware of whether any flight attendant was working in the overhead compartment or the overhead bin for any reason prior to this flight taking off?
I don't remember. We all closed bins, but I could not tell you who did what on that flight.
Okay. Do you have a recollection of whether that flight whether or not the overhead bins were at capacity?
No. If it was a full flight, then I assume that the overhead bins were pretty full, but I don't have a direct memory of this flight.
That's fine. How about the flight itself? Any recollection of what type of flight it was, meaning smooth, turbulent, somewhere in between?
I don't remember.
Are there any records that tell you in-flight information, such as whether or not there was turbulence or whether or not the seatbelt sign was on or off or anything like that?
Not for us. I don't know if anybody else has that information, but not for us.
Okay. Not something that the flight attendants get?
No.
Are you required to put in any sort of information, either during or after a flight, related to whether the flight was smooth versus turbulent, or whether or not the seatbelt signs were on or off, or during any period of time?
No.
Okay. Do you know whether anyone else is supposed to do that?
I have no idea if pilots do that or not.
Okay. While this flight was in the air after takeoff prior to landing, were you aware of any flight attendant or other person moving any bags in the overhead bins in or around row 25?
No, that I remember.
Okay. Similar to what you said before, you don't recall seeing it happen, it may have happened, you're just not sure. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. When this flight landed, where were you on the plane?
In my jump seat at the back of the plane.
Okay. Where was Claire?
Next to me.
And where was Brandon?
In his jump seat at the front of the plane.
During the course of the flight, there were announcements made by the flight attendants, is that correct?
Yes.
And is there a policy about who makes which announcement?
The purser is the one required to make the announcements.
And what's a purser?
The purser is the lead flight attendant,
Okay, who was that on this flight?
Brandon.
And the other two flight attendants, do they have a title other than purser?
No.
Other than, I'm sorry, strike that. So the purser makes all of the in-flight announcements with respect to the flight attendant announcements?
Yes.
Are there records kept whether or not the flight attendant announcements are made as opposed to not made during any particular flight?
Not a written record, no.
Okay, but it is policy to make certain announcements by the flight attendants during each flight, is that correct?
Yes.
Any reason to believe that those announcements were not made on this particular flight?
No, if the purser doesn't make them, then somebody will call and remind them.
Okay.
And it tells us what to do too. Certain announcements are like our cue to do certain things.
Okay. What announcements, if you know, well, let me go back a second. Have you ever been a purser?
Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with what announcements the purser is required to make during the course of a flight?
Yes.
Okay. How about before the flight takes off? There are also announcements made, correct?
Yes.
Do any of the pre-flight announcements have to do with carry-on bags?
Yes.
And how many pre-flight announcements deal with carry-on bags?
2 separate announcements, but they are repeated throughout the boarding process.
Okay. And how about during the flight? Announcements with respect to carry-on bags?
During the flight, there are no announcements specifically about carry-on bags.
Okay, and how about after the flight lands?
There are announcements about overhead bins and bags to be careful when opening because items may have shifted during flight.
I've heard that so many times in my life. I think everybody has, right?
We could probably all repeat that.
Yeah. Okay. The 2 separate announcements prior to the flight taking off, what are those announcements?
The boarding announcement is, the welcome aboard announcement, and as you make your way to your seat, please make sure you place your large carry-on items into the overhead bin. Any smaller items can be placed underneath the seat in front of you. Rollerboard bags tend to fit vestibules first, and then some flight attendants will get more specific if they feel like they want to, or if you're seeing passengers place bags in that shouldn't go up there.
Okay, and that you said was repeated various times. Is that determined by the flight attendant?
We're required to make it numerous times.
Okay, any specific number of times?
No, but I believe it's like every certain amount of minutes or something like that, but I don't remember exactly.
Okay, that's fine. And you said, I think, that there were 2 separate announcements regarding carry-ons prior to takeoff. What's the other one?
There's the door closure announcement, and that's usually right before the door closes to the plane, and it's just reminding everybody to make sure everything is stowed and in its proper place before takeoff.
Okay. And then you said when the flight lands, there's that announcement about, things may have shifted.
Yes.
When is that made?
It's usually during taxi from landing to the gate.
Okay. And again, it's your understanding that all of these announcements would have been made on this particular flight?
Yes.
But you just don't have an independent recollection one way or the other. Is that correct?
No, but I'm certain that they were made. It would have been bizarre, and I would have called if
Okay.
those announcements were
That's
made.
fine. So they're typically announcements that are always made?
Yes.
You have no reason to believe they were not made on this particular flight?
Right.
Okay. Now, you said when the flight lands, each of you are in your jump seats, 2 in the back on this flight, 1 in the front. When are you either required or permitted to get out of the jump seat after landing?
We get up at the same time that passengers do with the seatbelt sign going off, but that's when we're disarming all of the doors to the aircraft. That's our first duty. As soon as the seatbelt sign goes off, you disarm your doors.
Does the purser always sit in the front jump seat?
Yes.
Okay. And is it the purser who has the obligation to open the door?
The gate agent opens the door of the plane.
Okay. So, what's the purser doing from the time he gets up until the time the gate agent opens the door?
Gets up, disarms both of the doors in the front of the plane, and then the gate agent and customer service agent is usually right there, so you're watching through the window waiting for them to knock on the door, so you can give them a thumbs up that they can open the door.
Okay, when you say disarm, do you mean unlock?
So it's when the slides are engaged, like the emergency slides, when you arm the door, that's making sure that they're engaged. So if you were to open the door while the door is armed, the slides will open and everybody can get out of the plane. Disarming them is making sure that when you open the door of the plane, they don't inflate, because that would
Okay.
hurt the gate agent.
That's for sure.
And cost the airline lots of money.
Okay. And the flight attendants in the rear of the plane, when they are permitted to get up with the other passengers, what are their responsibilities at that time?
We immediately disarm our doors and then we're kind of just standing in the back of the plane, waiting for everybody to go.
Okay. Are there any procedures, I'll strike that, are there any policies, I guess is a better word, with respect to assisting passengers with their carry-ons as the flight is deplaning?
No.
Okay. In your experience, would you typically help any passengers take their bags out from overhead bins after the plane has landed and gotten to the gate?
No.
Have you ever done that as far as you can remember?
No.
Have you ever noticed any other flight attendant on any flight that you've worked on assist a passenger with a bag in the overhead bin after the plane has landed?
No.
Is there a policy that says flight attendants are not permitted to do that?
It's the same policy of, it's our risk, but it's pretty impossible to get into the aisles during deplaning, so we don't, and other passengers tend to help each other during deplaning more than they do during boarding.
Okay. Earlier I asked you about whether or not you recall seeing any flight attendants assisting with passenger bags. Again, back to when the plane was boarding, do you recall seeing any passengers in or around row 25 putting bags into the overhead?
I don't remember.
Okay. Based on your prior answer, I assume you did not see any flight attendant take any bag out of any overhead compartment during this particular flight
No.
after it landed. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall seeing any, a better question, do you have a specific recollection of seeing any passenger take a bag out of an overhead bin on this particular flight?
No, but it's hard to see that kind of stuff from the back of the plane when everybody's standing in the aisles, so.
Okay. It's your understanding that there was an incident on this flight after it landed, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me what you know about it.
During deplaning, a call light went off, and Claire and I, a lot of times people hit them accidentally, so we were trying to see if we could see where it was coming from, and almost immediately we got a call from the purser that said that somebody had been injured, and so we made our way up to the row that the call light was in, and people were deplaning during that time. We asked her what happened, and I was told that a passenger pulling his bag out of the overhead bin hit her with his bag. And I asked where he was, or if he was still on the plane, so that I could ask him what happened, but they said that he was already gone. And then we asked her, like how she was feeling, like what we could do if she wanted us to call paramedics. She asked for us to call paramedics, and we moved, after the flight, we asked her to sit down, and after the flight cleared a little bit, we moved her to first class. We sat with her until medics came. She asked for ice, but we had already dumped all the ice, which is procedure. And medics came shortly after, where we told her they would have everything that she would need when it came to that. And then the medic came on board, and I don't know exactly what they did with her. But then they asked her if she wanted an ambulance, and she said no. And then she asked for a wheelchair off the plane, so customer service brought down a wheelchair, and they took her off the plane.
Okay, thank you for that. From the time that you got the call, or let me ask that question. Did you actually take the call, or did Claire take the call about the injured passenger?
I don't remember.
Okay. And you said it was the purser that made the call, so I assume that's Brandon?
Yes.
From the time that either you or Claire took that call, until the time that the passenger was taken off the plane in a wheelchair, how long a period of time?
I would approximate like 20 minutes, but I don't remember very well the
Okay.
time. That's my guess with typical deplaning, but they were quick with the medics coming. I would remember if it was long, because that means I had to stay without getting paid.
Okay. Was there any conversation between you and the injured passenger regarding whether or not a flight attendant had packed the overhead bin over her head at that time?
No.
After learning about the incident, did you discuss with either Claire or Brandon whether either of them had assisted in packing the overhead bin above the injured passenger's row?
No.
I know in one of your prior answers a couple moments ago, you told me about some conversation that you had with the injured passenger, correct?
Yes.
Is there anything else that you spoke with her about that you have not already told me?
Not that I remember.
Okay. Were you present while the injured passenger was having conversations with either Claire or Brandon?
Yes, we were all there pretty much the whole time, I believe. Yeah, sitting there with her. I mean, I don't think I was ever not with her until the paramedics took her off.
Okay. During that period of time, were there conversations going on between the injured passenger and either Brandon or Claire?
Only about what happened, but nothing else. Well, we were all a part of the conversation, I believe, from what I
Okay.
remember.
Other than what you already told me, did you hear any conversation between either Brandon or Claire and the injured passenger about whether or not anyone had packed the bag over her head?
No.
Have you ever spoken with Claire about whether or not she placed any bags in the overhead bin above the injured plaintiff's row on that flight?
No.
Have you ever spoken with Brandon about whether or not he placed any bags in the overhead bin above the injured passenger's row on that flight?
No.
Did you make any attempt to speak with any other passenger about what had happened on the flight?
I mean, I attempted to find who she said hit her with the bag, but people were deplaning, so nobody really wants to stop and talk to you.
Understandable. What specifically did you do to attempt to locate that passenger?
I asked who it was and where they were.
And you say, I asked, you're referring to the injured passenger?
Yes.
And I believe earlier you said that she told you she believed that person was already gone?
Yes.
So was that the end of your search?
For him, yes.
Okay.
I can't leave the plane, so.
Why is that?
because of the required minimum on board the plane. So the minimum flight attendants have to be on the plane at any point there is even one passenger on board.
Okay, so if I understand that correctly, you're not permitted to get off the plane until all the passengers are off, is that correct?
Yes.
If perhaps there's a flight that has more than the minimum required flight attendants, then it would be possible for a couple of them to leave as long as the minimum number was still on board?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know whether Claire or Brandon did any investigation as to, well, strike that. Do you know whether Claire or Brandon spoke to any of the other passengers about what had happened?
I don't know.
Do you know whether Claire or Brandon went to look for the particular passenger that may have pulled the bag out?
Not that I know of, but we were told he was gone. So.
Okay. During the time that you were with the injured passenger in or around her seat, was Claire with you the whole time?
I think Claire went to the back to make sure there was no ice left, but otherwise, yes.
Okay. And was Brandon there at any point while the passenger was still in or around her own seat?
I don't believe he was with us until after all the passengers were off, because one flight attendant has to be with the door, and that's his responsibility as
Okay.
purser.
I think you said at some point you moved her up to the first class area.
Yes.
Is that right? Is that the area that Brandon was in?
Yes.
Okay. Was the injured passenger with anyone else?
Her husband.
Did you have any conversations with her husband about what had happened?
Yeah, all of us were talking together, so he was a part of the whole conversation.
Okay. Do you remember any specifics with respect to conversations with him?
No.
Do you recall speaking to him about whether he saw the incident occur?
Not that I remember details of, no.
Okay. Do you know whether the injured passenger's husband spoke to either Claire or Brandon about what had happened?
I don't know.
Are you certain that it was the injured passenger as opposed to her husband who told you the person that had pulled out the bag was already gone?
No, I'm not certain. He was there for the conversation, so
Okay.
I don't recall if she told me that or he told me that.
The bag that actually struck the passenger on the head was a separate bag from the one that was pulled out, right?
Objection.
Oh, is that your understanding?
You can answer. Okay. That's not what I was told originally.
Okay. Told by whom?
Her.
Okay, so you recall her telling you that the actual bag that was being yanked out was the one that hit her?
Yes.
Okay. And she told you that while she was still in or around her own seat?
Yes.
Did she describe the bag that hit her?
No.
Did her husband describe the bag that hit her?
Not that I remember.
Did her husband state that it was his understanding? Well, that's a bad question. Let me ask a different one. Was there any conversation with the husband about whether it was the bag that was pulled out by the other passenger being the bag that struck her in the head? Or was that just a conversation with the wife?
He was there during that conversation.
Okay. Did he say anything about that one way or the other?
No.
Was there any conversation with the injured passenger about whether she saw the bag actually hit her or not?
No. Not that I remember.
Okay. Do you know whether she saw the bag before it hit her in the head or not?
I don't know.
Do you recall any conversation in the front of the plane concerning the bag that struck her in the head being taken off by a passenger while you were all sitting there?
I don't believe we really talked about it, the three of us. I mean, they explained it as an accident, so I don't think we were looking to go after somebody specifically.
You said they referred to it as an accident? Who are you referring to?
The husband and wife
Okay.
made it, the way it was expressed to me was that it was an accident.
Okay. So no one was saying that someone intentionally hit her in the head with a bag, right?
Right.
Okay. While you're still on the plane, are there any conversations that you recall being a part of regarding this incident that you have not already told me about?
No, not that I remember.
Okay. And how about after you got off the flight? Did you have any conversations with anyone about this incident?
Yes.
When?
When Claire and I were exiting the airport, we ran into the medic.
Okay. Where was that?
Like near the exit of like the terminal C.
And you spoke to him or her?
Spoke to him, yes.
And what was that conversation about?
We asked if she was okay, and he said yes. And I mean, we were there when she refused the ambulance, so they took her out. And then the paramedic told us that she told him that she wanted to sue.
That you wanted what?
To sue.
Okay. So the paramedic told you and Claire that while he was with her, she had mentioned to him that she wanted to file a lawsuit?
Yes.
Okay. Was there anything else about a lawsuit other than what you've already told me?
And that's the only mention of it.
Was there any conversation about who she wanted to sue?
The airline.
Do you know the medic's name?
No.
Ever seen him before or since?
No.
Is the medic a United employee?
No, I believe Port Authority employee, but I'm not positive.
Okay. Did either you or Claire respond when he had mentioned that she said she wanted to sue?
Yes.
And what was the response?
How?
And who said that? You or Claire?
Of both of us.
Okay. And did he give any response?
No. No. He said, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what he said.
Is that the same medic who assisted her off the plane in a wheelchair?
Yes.
Do you know whether he was the only person who responded from the Port Authority, or were there others?
I believe there was one other, but I never spoke to him, so I don't recall.
Okay. Was that other person a medic also, or something else?
I don't know.
After the injured passenger and her husband left the flight, did you ever see them again?
No.
ever speak to them again?
No,
Do you know whether either Claire or Brandon ever saw them again after the flight?
no,
How about whether or not either of them ever spoke to the passenger or her husband after the flight?
no,
Did you speak to the medic again after that one conversation you had?
no,
Did you speak to Claire again about after that one conversation with the medic about this incident?
no,
Okay. After leaving the plane, did you speak to Brandon again about the incident?
no,
Do you know whether Brandon ever spoke with Claire about the incident after the flight?
no.
Brandon was not involved in that conversation that you mentioned with the medic, is that correct?
Correct.
How long was that conversation between you, Claire, and the medic?
Like a minute or two.
Okay. Are there any policies or procedures about reporting an incident like this to the company?
Yes.
And is it a policy or a procedure?
Both.
Okay,
Yeah.
and what is the policy?
If a standout incident occurs with regards to any concern on the plane, like safety, medical, etc., we file an irregular operations report called an IOR.
Is it the purser that makes that decision, or is any flight attendant able to make that decision?
We all have to do it if there's an event. Even if you didn't particularly see it, you file one that says, I didn't see it, but I was told this, or I heard this. Or
Okay. So for this particular incident, there was an IOR created, is that right?
Yes.
And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how does that happen? Is it Brandon that says we got to do an IOR or something else?
Yes, usually somebody will say that, we all need to do an IOR, and then I believe you have 72 hours after the incident to fill it out, and you go online and get the form, and you each individually fill out your own IOR and then submit it to the company.
Okay.
All online.
And after you submit it online, does anyone from the company contact you? Either email or online or via call?
I've never had somebody contact me. I don't know if they do, if it's particularly serious or not.
Okay, so after you submitted your IOR for this flight, that was the end of the investigation? Well, not investigation, but that was the end of your involvement in reporting the incident?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever seen your IOR?
Yes.
Have you seen Brandon's?
No.
Have you seen Claire's?
No.
When you submit an IOR, do you keep a copy at that time, or is it something that's sent to you later?
We get like a receipt of it, and then I think you can go look at it for a certain amount of time, but I don't know if they go away.
Okay. If you were able to view it after submitting this particular IOR, did you?
Not during that time, no.
Okay. Have you seen it recently?
Yes.
Have you seen it in preparation for this deposition today?
Yes.
Okay. In between the time, in or around the time that the incident happened and when you reviewed it for your deposition today, had you seen it at any other time?
No.
Prior to submitting your IOR, did you speak with either Claire or Brandon about what you would be putting in that report?
No, because you write down what you saw happen or what was told to you by passengers.
How about after you submitted your IOR, did you talk with either Claire or Brandon about either your or their IORs?
No.
Are you aware of any other incident reports that are generated with respect to when an incident occurs on a flight?
Not for things like this, no.
Okay. Other than your IOR, have you seen any company documents related to this incident?
No,
How about any documents that are not United documents?
no.
During the time that the passenger that got hit in the head was still on the plane, did she appear to be in pain?
She was upset. I had a hard time deciphering if it was pain or if it was shock. And she said that her head hurt, and I think that like her jaw hurt.
Why did you feel she was upset? What did you see?
Well, she was crying. I mean, she had a bag pulled down on her head. So I think that she was a little bit just in shock, I think, over the incident.
Did she say where the bag had hit her?
On the head.
Did she say anything about being in pain?
She told us that her head hurt and that her jaw hurt.
You said that, I'm sorry. Thank you. For you. So, did you mark it? Did you mark it already or no? One works. I was going to say P1, but one is fine. This morning I'm going to hand you a document that's been marked Exhibit 1 for identification, and I know it's a horrible copy, but it's unfortunately the best copy that I have. So if you would just take a look at that. And I guess the first question is whether or not you've ever seen that document before.
No.
Okay, do you know what it is?
Not explicitly, no.
Okay. See the signature down towards the bottom of that document?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, just for the
Yeah,
record.
sorry.
Okay. Can you tell whose signature that is?
All I can read is what I assume is Lieutenant Christopher, but I don't know what the last name is.
Okay. I believe it's Christopher Geyser, G-Y-S-E-R. Does that name ring a bell at all?
No.
Do you know whether Christopher Geyser was the medic that you've been referring to or not?
I don't know his name.
Do you know a Port Authority police officer, Jeppson, J-E-P-P-S-O-N?
Not by name, no.
Okay. Do you know whether he was the medic that was on board the flight?
I don't know.
Was there any conversation between you and the medic about what had happened?
No.
Do you recall there being a police officer from the Port Authority on the flight at all?
I don't know, sometimes they're like police officers that have the EMT training, so it's hard for me to honestly distinguish between.
Okay. Did you speak with any person about how the incident happened other than what you've already told me about?
No.
To the right of the signature that we've been talking about, Christopher, there's another signature there. Can you make that out?
No.
To the left of that signature, it says P.O. Jepson. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And looking at this, I just want to make sure that your memory is not refreshed that there were, in fact, multiple people from the Port Authority that could have been on board. Is that accurate?
I think I did say that. I remember there being 2. Like, I remember one specifically, the one that I spoke to. And
Okay.
then potentially one other person, but I don't remember.
Okay, then
that.
I don't recall you saying that. I apologize.
That's okay.
The person that you do recall speaking to, was that the person you've been talking about as the medic?
Yes.
Okay. So you spoke to the medic person, whoever that was, and you
Yes.
never spoke to the other person? Is that
Not that I
right?
recall.
Okay. And again, looking at Exhibit 1, you're not sure whether either of those 2 people are the medic that you've been discussing?
No, I don't know their names.
Okay. That is 2, please. Thank you. I'm going to show you what we've now marked as Exhibit 2 for identification. I would ask you to take a moment and take a look at that for me. For the purposes of the record, this document has been marked or Bates stamped United 021 through 022. Have you ever seen that document before?
No.
Do you know what that document is?
No.
Okay, so based on that response, I take it that you did not create this document, is that correct?
Correct.
Any idea who would have?
No.
Anthony, after you're done with this document, do you mind if we take a 5-minute? I just need to use the restroom.
Totally fine.
Thanks.
The information towards the bottom of this document, do you see where it says post-departure information?
Yes.
And then there's some times located in there.
Yes.
I understand that you didn't create this document, you've never seen this document before, and you're not sure who created this document, but do you have any reason to believe that the information in that post-departure information section is not accurate?
No, I would have no reason to believe that.
Okay. Do you have an independent recollection about any of the times that are listed there with respect to this particular flight?
No.
And then below that, the same questions with respect to passenger information. First, any reason to believe that's inaccurate?
No.
And do you have an independent recollection about whether or not this information is accurate?
No. I don't.
Okay. We'll take 5.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Warren, I'm now going to hand you what we've marked as exhibit number 3. again, just for purposes of the record, this document has been base stamped United 027 through 30. If you can take a look at that for me, please. And the first question is whether you recognize what that is.
Yes, it's an IOR.
Okay, can you tell whether this is your IOR?
It's Claire's.
I'm sorry?
It's Claire's IOR.
Oh, I gave it the wrong one. Okay. Move on to number 4. Well, now that you have it in front of you, earlier you said you had never seen Claire's IOR, is that correct?
Yes.
And now, looking at what I believe is her IOR, can you confirm that you have never seen that before today?
Yes.
Okay. We'll move on to number 4. Again, take a look through that document. Let me know what it is.
Brandon's IOR.
Okay. And similar to Claire's, can you confirm that you have never seen that document before today?
Yes.
And again, just for the purposes of the record, that document is base stamped United 023 to 026. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to number 5. Take a look at that for me. And let me know if you recognize what it is.
It's my IOR.
Okay. Earlier you said that you reviewed that document in preparation for today's deposition, is that right?
Yes.
Was that today?
Yes.
Okay. Prior to reviewing it this morning, do you recall ever seeing it in a printed out form?
No.
On the first page, part of the way down, it says employee information. Do you see that? And then just under that, it says name, Warren, Faith.
Yes.
I want to try to get an understanding, if I could, as to how this document is created. And what I mean by that is when you're looking at it online, are there fields that need to be put in?
Yes.
Okay, so for example, when you're looking at this online, you'll see an area where it says name and you put your name in?
I believe so,
Okay,
but I don't specifically remember. It's been years since I've made one.
okay. Is there any way that you could tell from looking at this document what information you inputted as opposed to what information was already there or inputted by someone else?
Information that I would have had to put in myself would have been my name, my employee number, my base, my email, and then the aircraft type, flight number. However, if somebody has created the IOR for the flight first, then it's the record of it is there, so you can just select the flight and like add your IOR. So
Okay,
some of that information may have been put in by whoever did the IOR first.
okay. And do you recall whether you were the first person to submit information for this flight's IOR?
I was not.
Okay, do you know who was?
No.
Okay. So then, based on that answer, I take it that some of the information related to the flight would have already been included when you inputted your information?
Yes, the flight number and then the departure airport, destination airport
Okay.
would have already been in there, and the aircraft type.
Okay. On the second page, there's a section that says crew information. Do you see that?
Yes.
So I see your name, I see Claire's name, I see Brandon's name, and then there are 3 other names above that. The first one is Michael, I guess it's Mamo, M-A-M-O. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you know who that is?
That would have been the deadheader.
Okay, and underneath that there's someone, Michael Schubert. Do Do you know who that is?
It's telling me they were the first officer.
Where do you see that?
Position FO01.
Okay, and by first officer, is that either a,
Co-pilot.
okay, first officer is co-pilot. And underneath Mr. Schubert, we see Randall, gosh, it looks like Hino. Do you see that?
Yes.
Would that be the captain?
Yes, CA is captain.
Okay, I figured that one out. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next section down, looks like it's titled Conditions. Do you see that?
Yes.
There's a section that says hours awake prior to event, and then it doesn't appear that anything's written in there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Any idea why there's no information in that particular section?
No.
To the right of that, it says hours on duty prior to event, and then the entry says 12 hours. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that referring to how many hours you were working that day before this incident happened?
Yes.
So this particular flight that the incident occurred on, how long was that flight?
I don't know specifically how long it was, but I would guess around 3 hours and 45 minutes if it's
Okay,
Denver to Newark.
And you're on the plane for some time before that and for some time after it lands, correct?
Yes.
Based on this 12-hour section, I take it you were on a flight prior to this flight on the
Yes.
same day? Do you recall which flight that was?
Hartford, Connecticut to Denver.
Okay. The next section says phase of operation, and the word other appears beneath it. Do you see that?
Yes.
What is that referring to?
I have no idea.
Okay. Do you know whether you wrote the word other in there or not?
No. I assume I didn't since I don't know what it means.
Okay. Just below that, there's a section that says taxonomies from linked reports. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then there's a bunch of entries underneath it. Do you know what any of those entries are referring to?
No.
Okay. Did you put any of that information into this report?
No.
On the next page, there is a section up top that says passenger injury. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then underneath that, it says passenger name. It doesn't appear that there's any information to the right of that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Any idea why that is?
I probably didn't know their name.
Okay. Underneath that, it says witness names, and again, it doesn't appear that any information is included. Do you see that?
Yes.
When it refers to witnesses, does that mean people that are not employed by United?
I would assume it meant people employed by United since we don't have information from other people.
Okay, so you take this to mean as any other United employees?
Yes.
Okay. And there's nothing written next to that entry as well, correct?
Yes.
Below that, it says assisting medical professional names and contact information. Do you see that?
Yes.
That also appears to not have any information input there. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then there's 3 questions where it requires, I guess, a circle to be checked in. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did you check in those 3 circles there?
I don't know. All I remember when filling out IORs is filling in the flight information and then my account of it. I don't even remember seeing any of these other things
Okay.
on there. So
You see where it says MedLink notified?
yes,
What's MedLink?
MedLink is when you're in flight and something happens and you need further assistance with a medical problem. So you notify the ground and they'll often give us directions and then are the ones who coordinate with people meeting the flight.
Okay. And just above that, it says enhanced emergency medical kit use.
Yes.
What is the enhanced emergency medical kit?
So we have medical kits on board that can only be opened by doctors.
Okay, and none of those items were utilized for this incident, is that correct?
Correct.
And the last section there says paramedics, is it MET, M-E-T, flight?
Met flight, yes.
And it says no information. Would that be referring to whether or not anyone comes onto the flight from the outside?
Yes.
Okay. You're not sure whether or not you checked no information here, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. But we know that that's not a correct entry, right?
Paramedics did meet flight, so.
Okay. A little bit further down, there's a section that says narrative, and then there's a section that says subject, parentheses, keywords, and parentheses. Do you see that?
Yes.
And underneath where it says keywords, it says PAX-injury-head/neck/back, comma, PAX-injury-EMT.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that information input by yourself?
Yes, there's a drop-down box
Okay.
of things to select of the category of the incident.
Okay. How many different drop-down boxes are there for the information that appears here on that line?
That would have only been 2 boxes that I checked.
Okay. What does the PAX mean?
Passenger.
Okay. And then is the drop-down for type of injury?
Yes.
And head/neck/back is one of the possible choices?
Yes.
Okay. And then to the right of that, where it says injury again, next to it says EMT. Is the EMT one of the drop downs?
Yes.
And what other choices are there in that drop down section?
I do not remember.
Okay. Below that it says narrative. Do you see that?
Yes.
And just below that it says customer injury.
Yes.
Is that already there, or did you input that?
You have to select something or write something in, I assume.
Okay. And then we have the typed paragraph. Do you see that?
Yes.
And is that something that you would have typed in?
Yes, I did that.
Okay. I will ask you just to read that paragraph to yourself. You don't have to read it out loud. And I do want to make sure that as you sit here today, whether or not that is still accurate as far as you know.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. You write in here she seemed emotionally distressed. I know you mentioned that earlier.
Yes.
You said she was crying, but was there anything other than her crying that led you to believe she was emotionally distressed?
I mean, crying, tone of voice.
There's nothing in this section about you speaking to the medic in the terminal, correct?
No,
Any reason why?
because it wasn't about the plane. This is what happened on the plane.
Okay.
Didn't think it was important at the time.
That's fine. Do you recall anyone talking about the bag that hit her being a lime green bag?
No, I don't remember. Colors.
Do you recall any conversation about the bag description at all?
I believe I was told that it was a rollerboard.
Okay, and who do you recall telling you that?
The husband, I think, or the wife. I honestly don't remember.
Okay,
One of the two of them.
okay. Earlier you said that this information needs to be input within 72 hours. Do you know when you actually created this document?
Not without looking at the date on it, no.
Yeah, I don't, is there a date on here somewhere?
Yeah, created June 17th. It's on the top right on the first page.
Okay. June 17, 2016 at 11 p.m. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
I suspect that you don't specifically remember doing it at that time, or do you?
No,
Any reason to believe that that's not the case?
I'm sure that's true on the night out.
Okay. Why don't we go back to number 3, which is Claire's IOR. And why don't we turn to the page where it has the narrative. Now above the paragraph that she typed in, just below the word narrative, you see it says baggage causes injury.
Yes.
That's a little bit different from yours. You wrote customer injury. And again, I'm trying to just get an understanding as to whether that's a drop down or if that's something that each person individually types in.
I don't remember if that section is dropped down or if it's something that we type in.
Okay. In the typewritten paragraph here, it seems to, well, before we get there, have you ever read this before?
No.
Why don't you take a second and just read her paragraph? I'll ask you some questions about it.
Okay.
The first line of her narrative, of Claire's narrative, says that the phone rang and Brandon informed me that a passenger around Route 21 had a bag fall on her head. After reading that, does that refresh your memory at all about whether you took the call or she took the call?
I believe her that she took the call. Yeah.
Okay. On the first page of Claire's IOR, it indicates it was created on June 18th at 1:22 a.m. Do you see that?
Yes.
So that would have been, I guess, about 2.5 hours after you did yours. Is that right? Yours was June
Yes.
17 at 11 p.m. Hers is June 18 at 1:22 a.m.
Yes.
Was there any conversation between you and Claire about these IORs during that time period, from when these entries were made?
I don't believe so. I don't even have a phone number.
And similar to your narrative, Claire doesn't say anything about speaking to the medic with regard to the injured woman wanting to sue. Is that correct?
Correct.
Was Claire involved in the conversation where the injured passenger told you that it was the same person's bag? It was the person's bag that hit her in the head as opposed to a different bag?
We got there right at the same time, so I believe she would have been, but I don't directly remember exactly what was said with her being involved.
And in Claire's narrative, it doesn't say anything about whose bag would have hit the injured passenger. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it says a bag fell on her head.
Let me take a look at number 4. Exhibit 4, I'm sorry. That's Brandon's IOR, correct?
Yes.
So it looks like he was first. The created date is June 16 at 5:56 p.m. Do you see that?
Yes.
And similar to what I asked you about, Claire, did you have any conversation with Brandon about his IOR during this time period?
No.
Going back to that same page that we've been looking at for Brandon, the narrative section, you see that?
Yes.
And the first line there underneath narrative, he writes injury, comma, deplaning, comma, carry on baggage, which is, again, a little bit different than what you wrote and a little bit different than what Claire wrote, correct?
Yes.
So again, you're understanding that that's just individualized information that's put in by the person creating the report?
Yes.
Take a second if you don't mind and just read Brandon's narrative.
Okay.
When he says at door 1, is that referring to the front of the plane?
Yes, that's the front door of the plane.
Okay. He writes, I had several passengers tell me that a passenger had pulled a rollerboard back down upon another passenger's head and that she might be injured. You see that?
Yes.
Are you aware of who any of the passengers were that told Brandon that there was an incident?
No,
Do you know whether Brandon knows who any of those passengers are?
I don't know. I would assume no.
He writes, and obviously I'll have the opportunity to ask him, but I just want to get your understanding. He says a rollerboard back down. I mean, do you know if that word back is describing the rollerboard, or if he's saying back down meaning up and then back down?
I think the way I read it originally, I took it as a typo for bag, but I don't know exactly what he meant. So
Have you used the term rollerboard back?
no.
Okay. All right, why don't we just take a moment? Let me check through some of my notes here. I think I'm done. I just want to make sure, okay? Whether United did any investigation to try to determine who the passenger was that pulled the bag out?
I don't think.
Did Brandon ever say anything to you about the passenger telling him that he made magic happen with respect to him packing the overhead bin above her head?
No.
don't have any other questions. Thanks so much for your time.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Is it United's policy and procedure for United flight attendants to physically assist passengers with their carry-on bags?
No,
No, it is not their policy and procedure.
it's not our policy to lift bags.
And in the past, when you have assisted passengers with their carry-on bags, is that in your capacity as a flight attendant?
No, it's just nice.
And when you've assisted passengers, strike that. When you assist passengers with their bags during boarding, is it just to help passengers find overhead space?
We'll point out overhead bin space if they're looking for some. If we see any empty spaces, we'll show them
Okay.
overhead bin space.
So you do assist passengers in the boarding process with their carry-on bags, but not in a physical
Not
manner?
physically.
Okay. I have nothing else.
Just one follow-up. You said if you do assist a passenger with a bag, it's not in your capacity as a flight attendant?
It's not my job as a flight attendant. That's not why I'm doing it.
Okay, but you're doing it while you're working as a flight attendant, correct?
Correct, I'm working as a flight attendant, but it is not our policy to lift bags. If I choose to lift a bag, it's because I'm feeling compassionate towards somebody,
Okay,
which is my own feelings. It has nothing to do with United as a company.
okay. If that does happen, I think you said it happened a couple times for some pregnant women, does the company punish you in any way?
No, but if I was to get injured, it would be my own responsibility and it would be my own money. If I had to take time off of work, it wouldn't be compensated.
Okay, so if you picked up a bag, it's your understanding that if you picked up someone else's bag on a flight and you hurt your back, you don't believe you'd be able to make a workers' compensation claim for that, is that correct?
Objection.
Do you understand the question?
I believe so. But I honestly don't know the specifics of making those kinds of claims, so I couldn't speak further to that.
Okay. Have you ever been injured while working as a flight attendant?
No.
Are you aware of any other flight attendants that have been injured assisting anyone else with a bag?
Yes.
Whom?
I couldn't give you specific names, but I've worked with people who have been injured helping people with
Okay.
their bags.
And do you know whether any of those people were forced to miss time from work as a result of that?
Yes.
And were those people paid for that time off?
I did not ask them.
Do you know whether any of those people made a workers' compensation claim related to those injuries?
I did not ask them.
Do you know whether the training manual or safety manual specifically states that if you assist someone with their bag, that United will not take any responsibility for what may happen to you during doing that?
Objection. You can answer if you understand.
I don't recall if there's any specific thing in the manual or not.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Claire.
Faith.
Faith, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Doing that.